Hey everybody, and welcome to the Goblins and Growlers podcast. I'm Brandon at Way of Brandalore, and Josh is under the weather and under the water today. So we got Noah Downs Esquire, noted tabletop role-playing game attorney, here talking to us. Noah, thank you for pinch hitting for us today.
Of course. Listen, when our good friend Josh is on the IR, we need to have somebody of substance, somebody of a high caliber, somebody of knowledge pop on. And since they weren't available, I decided to come along.
Yeah, exactly. You're a man of substance, but in a much different way. I think.
Exactly. I'm a substance. Okay. Anyways, like Polonius. I'm full of substance.
Yeah.
There's a Hamlet joke.
So the original plan Josh and I had today was to take sort of a look back at 2023, which was, to put it charitably, a tumultuous year in tabletop role-playing games, especially if you're a bunch of wizards situated on the coast.
Right.
So Josh gets to miss out on that fun today. Right. And Noah's here to do that. Noah, do you have any real quick plugs up front, maybe for a podcast you might do, or your social handles?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Noah Downs, aka my lawyer friend. That's important. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and TikTok there. But the most important thing I want all of you to do right now is to open up your phones, which you're already listening to this podcast. Don't hit pause. Do this while you're talking, and go and search for the Forgotten Paths podcast. It's a D&D actual play podcast. We have 60 episodes, 1 hour each, full campaign, plus a bunch of miniseries. It's fantastic. I got friends on it, etc. Go download it, like it, rate it. I don't care if you listen, but feel free to. But yeah, boost our stats, baby.
All right. Yeah. Remember what I was saying about having to edit out long intros from the beginning of the podcast?
Yeah, keep that.
Yeah. I'll jump on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. I know the main thing that we all want to talk about is the OGL controversy.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like a year ago, when we were at MagFest and we were vendors at MagFest, Goblins and Growlers was last year. And pretty much everybody who came up to us that weekend and came to the booth was like, how are y'all feeling about the OGL changes? How's that going to affect everything you're doing? We're like, well, yeah, it's going to affect us. It's a thing. It's definitely a thing. But yeah, what a cluster that was, and what a bizarre ending to
it. So the OGL, for everyone that's listening that maybe has been under a rock or doesn't pay attention to the internet, which case good for you. Is the D&D open gaming license. And so there was an open gaming license that Wizards of the Coast had out called OGL. And it was in place for 22 years, and it effectively created an ecosystem under which third-party creators, publishers, creators, and designers could create and publish their adventures, their works. Obviously, G&G and QPR have their own publications as well in your one-page dungeons. It allows you to publish using the D&D rule set and certain parts of the SRD reference document. And so Wizards of the Coast, for those of you who missed it, said, nah, we don't need that. Let's charge people if they make over a certain amount and also keep all their IP. It's not a license. It's a terrorism. It's terrorism. And so they screwed that up.
And tell me if you remember sort of the zeitgeist before that happened, but I remember it just being sort of a looming threat for a very brief period of time. But I'll admit, toward the end of 2022, I wasn't paying any attention to it. How long was that bubbling up as a possibility?
It bubbled up all the way back to Gen Con of 2022.
So summer of 2022.
Yeah. And that was when people were like, oh no, this is coming down the pipeline. And then in December, I was asked by a client who was slightly panicked to come out and go to PAX Unplugged in a whirlwind 36 hours so I can meet all the people that I was going to be representing at the beginning of January. And that was the express and stated purpose. And so OGL exploded on January 5th of 2023. And when is this episode coming out?
This episode is coming out Monday, and today is the 4th, and it's Thursday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So the 8th.
Yeah, so tomorrow will be the anniversary. And so looking back on it, OGL was one of the biggest mistakes that Wizards of the Coast has ever made in its entire history.
Yeah. And this is a company also that has left racist stuff in legacy publications for 30 years.
Oh no, not just left it, also republished it.
True. and then said they were going to do better, and then published more new stuff, i.e., the Spelljammer book that's behind me right now.
Oh yeah, that's right. So
yeah.
But yeah, I would say that, so what was cool about how the OGL worked in the 22 years leading up to January 5th, 2023, is that it allowed Wizards of the Coast to not have to publish their own works as much. So like before it was, oh God, we've got to put this out, crank this, do this, the art. Oh my God, we're working around the clock to get things out. And because it put a license out into the ecosystem and allowed third parties to make and sell their own works and make a living off of it, it built this cottage industry where Wizards only had to create the pillars of the industry and the pillars of D&D, publishing 5 to 6 books a year that added to the lore, pushed everything forward. And these third parties could build things in and around it. And so when you go out and you say, nah, screw that, we're gonna drop a bomb in the middle of that ecosystem, it scares people.
Yeah. And I mean, like everybody else, like everybody was just sitting there saying, like, what the fuck were they thinking? Like, what was the thought process behind that? Because like you look at the most recent Q3 earnings, right? And like and WotC and the digital gaming made like $1 billion in revenue. It was like just shy of $1 billion.
Yeah.
And that, that's before like adjusted profit and everything like that. But let's just look at that revenue number because it's insane, because the profit number was still insane, right? Yeah. So like making that much money and then saying like, you know what, let's destroy an entire portion of the tabletop economy.
Yeah.
Right. And just like, how do they think that's not going to alienate people? Because wasn't part of the original proposal like, oh, well, like you will be able to publish this stuff, but we're going to get like 70% of the revenue. Like I'm casting back and I'm remembering that there were some like weird draconian conditions under which you would be able to publish.
Yeah, so you could OGL the OGL 1.1, as we'll distinguish make a distinguishment of. OGL 1.1 was the new and proposed one. It meant that you had to report works that you are making to Wizards of the Coast. It meant that you had to report the revenue from your work if you make more than 50K a year, which sounds like a big number, but it's really not in this industry.
Right.
And then if you make over a certain threshold, which at the time was a proposed 750,000, but could be lowered simply by notice or no notice by Wizards of the Coast, you have to pay a 25% royalty. Now, think about it this way: a lot of people are sitting here thinking, "Holy shit! If you're making 750K working in the D&D space, WotC created D&D, they should get 25%." And normally, I'd agree with you, except that the way that this particular industry works, we have Kickstarters that explode. And those Kickstarters aren't just, oh, hey, we came up with some pins and ideas. They're very carefully planned. Like the Obojima Kickstarter that 1995 Games just put out. Beautiful, amazing Kickstarter. I think raised 2.6 million. If they had to pay a 25% royalty over 750K, that is their entire profit margin plus some.
Yeah.
Because they have to hire contractors. They're running their company for a certain amount of time off of
that. Like it's really easy to say, like using that $750,000 number, like, oh, that's fantastic, you shouldn't be complaining about that. That 750 does not go a long way after you start factoring in like your variable costs, like your direct labor and everything. Like Kickstarter takes a portion of that too.
Yeah.
Like when you do that. So like what is Kickstarter's percentage?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head right now. Because I candidly have some behind the scenes information that's in my head, but but it's not insignificant. It's not super high. I still recommend Kickstarter. But it's
I'm not knocking it or anything. I'm just saying like that's just another cost you have to factor in when you're looking at that magical 6-figure number. So it's a raw deal for people.
And then on top of that, Wizards of the Coast would receive a perpetual, irrevocable right to use your work and to allow others to use your work without paying you anything.
Yeah.
So if you create something huge, it can appear in the D&D movie without any payment to you.
Yeah. It's so wild because it's like Wizard was smoking the fantasy so much that they're like, well, we'll just set up our own little fiefdom and everybody has to do exactly what we say because they're peasants.
And it wasn't even really Wizards. It was Hasbro, the parent company. Because on December 8th of 2022, right before this is when we kind of all realized, oh no. December 8th, Hasbro announced to its investors that D&D has never been more popular and it has really great fans and engagement. But the hobby is under monetized, even though they made $1 billion in the previous calendar year. And so in order to increase that monetization at the time, I told people you can do two things. You can hire a team of writers, creatives, and creators to increase the offerings and publications that Wizards are cranking out, or you can just take money from people by instituting a royalty. And they decided to go the way of paying. And that's just not okay. It takes a foundational document of D&D and something that people relied on for 2 decades and replaces it something that monetizes D&D at the community's expense.
Yeah. It was like the Bill of Rights of D&D.
Yeah.
And what they were saying was like, well, you know what? We're going to put soldiers in your home and you can't say anything. You can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Fuck your fourth.
Yes. Noted attorney. No downs.
Full of substance, signifying nothing. But the good news is that it had a good outcome, right?
Yeah. But I want
to make sure I say that early in the video.
Yeah, true. That'll be on the thumbnail. You're just going, but it had a good outcome.
It had a good outcome.
But the thing I just can't get past, and it's really easy to just be like, blah, 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 public corporate, public company, blah, 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 capitalism. Yeah. But there has to be some neurons to rub together to be like, oh, like if we institute this change, there's going to be a tremendous backlash. Like it does not take an educated person to come up with that. It just needs somebody who understands cause and effect in the universe.
And WotC was told that, and as a result, I was part of this tiny Discord group that was filled with creators, and they were all asking questions. And from that Discord group, the hashtag D&D Be Gone was born, and that led to 40,000 people canceling their D&D Beyond subscriptions. And that's when WotC said, "Oh, hold up."
Yeah.
Wait, let's not be hasty. And so they did change course. They proposed OGL 1.2, claimed that OGL 1.1 was just a draft, even though it had been offered for signature to my clients. It switched to OGL 1.2, and OGL 1.2 was not better. It was arguably the same.
Very charitable of you.
Yeah, it was not better. But what we ended up rallying around, they said, yeah, we don't need the royalty, but we still need to update the OGL. And so what they did was we rallied around the definition of irrevocable, giving WotC an irrevocable license, or whether or not the WotC's license to us was revocable too, because they kept playing around with that term. And they redefined the word irrevocable to mean revocable. And it was so funny.
They were trying to turn it into irregardless.
Yeah, exactly. And here's what crushed me as part of this. I was obviously heavily involved in this. This is going to be the most animated you're going to see me for this whole video, because I know the most about this, and the rest of the stuff I'll pretend. Kidding. But what crushed me was that WotC employees got sideswiped. And that's not okay. And if you take nothing else away from this video, you listening, watching at home, here is your soundbite. No matter what a corporation does, the individual front-facing employees that just are doing their job and had nothing to do with the poor decision-making do not deserve your vitriol. And frankly, they could be your friends. They're your foot in the door to making change. And so sending them death threats is not okay. And unfortunately, a lot of WotC employees had to deal with that. And I think, fortunately, things turned out the way that they did, and WotC did backtrack. But that was really unfortunate to see that kind of ugly side of our side of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, at the end, it was stupid and it was a bummer. But at the end of the day, it's a game, and let's not threaten people's lives with that.
God.
And somebody will come back and say, well, they were threatening livelihoods, and well, it's not the same.
And ironically, like a couple of weeks later, WotC was like, oh yeah, you're threatening them, well, don't threaten them anymore, we're laying them off.
Yeah, exactly. And we Josh and I spent a lot of time talking about that, I think, in the last episode. But by the time we got it had been done to death kind of by the time we got to it. So we just talked about it for maybe like 15 or 20 minutes. But it's like as sort of an aside for that I don't think I have on our show notes. It's just like, it was hilarious as I was just like zooming around YouTube over the last like 3 weeks, and just so many assholes on these channels who are just clickbaiting the hell out of their time. I literally saw one that said Dungeons and Dragons on life support. And I clicked into the video, and then I watched it for a few minutes, and then I put a comment on there, and I was like, "Hey, this title is like really hyperbolic." And then I'm like, "I know you know this, but like this is really hyperbolic because blah 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 blah. It's like literally stronger than it's ever been before, even after this." And I shit you not, he responded to my comment, the owner of the channel, and said, of course it's a clickbaity title, because if I didn't do that, nobody would click on the video."
Fair.
No, it's not. It's honest. It's not fair.
That's what I mean. It's honest, not fair.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying, hey, I don't like capitalism, but damn, I'm good at it.
Yeah.
So
I don't like capitalism. Here's my mortgage.
Yeah, exactly. So good for them. You know what? I'm not even mad.
Yeah. But yeah, so like, I think the real juke that happened here was just like, and then it goes into Creative Commons, and that just blew up so many people's plans, it seems like.
Well, so I want to hear your perspective and why you'd particularly say that. What I would say was,
well, before you pollute my thought process, let me just put it out there, or because I'll start equivocating if I incorporate what you have to say.
Right.
But here, from my perspective as a consumer, it was like this. It was, like there was talk about maybe it going into Creative Commons, but nobody was really like feeling solid about that.
Right.
And then it did. But, in that month-long period, when everything was really at a high boil, you had your Paizo's and your Kobold presses and everything.
Project Black Flag, yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, we're coming to the rescue. We're going to develop this whole new system. And at the time, I'm positive that there's like audio and video evidence of me saying this at the time. I was like, this is stupid, because it's like the fracturing of streaming, because these people, like, D&D, for better or worse, is the GURPS of modern tabletop role-playing games, right? So if they just fracture it, and then every third party is like, well, we're going to create our own system, then that's stupid. Because there's no viable alternative at that point. There's just a lot of little things. So they all start doing this, and then it's like a record scratch when WotC puts it into Creative Commons, puts 5.1 into Creative Commons.
Yep.
And you immediately hear the gears grinding to a halt. And Kobold Press, Tales of the Valiant. We had an episode recently where we were just asking, like, is that relevant? Yeah. And I think my answer is no, because at the time, I think they were it seems to me that they were planning on doing something maybe not transformative, but much different than 5e.
Yeah.
But you look at the Black Flag SRD now, and it's like it's 5e. It's just got a couple of extra things. They treat like inspiration differently. They've got a few bits here, a few bits there. A Kobold Press employee literally said in some sort of story, it's 5e with a new coat of paint.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing, is like, you're right. WotC juked everyone out of their shoes, including themselves. WotC, so WotC was trying to dribble down the court and land this basket, just to keep on with the basketball analogy. And trying to land this thing and shoot their shot, and they kept like tripping and kept fouling. And finally they're like, you know what, let's just shoot a 3, put in the Creative Commons. And they did the jump shot, but they left their shoes on the court. Because they left so many things in there clearly by accident. They're like, oh no, we meant to leave Strahd von Zarovich in there.
Isn't the term beholder in there now?
Yeah, the term beholder's in there. And so they say, oh yeah, we meant to. They clearly didn't mean to. They rushed to an outcome, and it happened.
Yeah. I worked in newspapers for 20 years, and that's exactly what happened. That's how you get a bad misspelling or the wrong person's name in a headline. Yeah. You're like, well, it's 2 minutes to deadline, and we got to send this thing now.
Yeah, exactly. And so they juked everyone, including themselves. But at the end of the day, they put the SRD for 5e into the Creative Commons. And they said, you can use OGL 1.0a. We're not touching it. Or you can put in this Creative Commons CC BY, so an attribution license. So as long as you properly attribute when you're using it, then, and you're only using things from the SRD, then you're good to go. So I think there was, at the end of the day, the community had a huge win here, and so I'm really proud of what we did.
Yeah, but like again, like looking at it from my perspective as a consumer, like does that track, right? Like these third parties, like these larger third parties were like, "Oh, we've got an amazing plan for this." And then they just had the rug pulled out from under them.
Yeah, they did. Because if
Okay.
they didn't have anything to rail against anymore.
Yeah.
And that press led to a lot of sales. You couldn't buy a Pathfinder book for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
It was the hottest thing on the shelves. But because WotC backtracked so hard, there was just all of a sudden just a void. And when
Yeah.
it's like when you push really hard and then you like just pull something out, everything just goes kind of cascading.
Yeah.
They kind of lost their momentum a little bit. Now I represent a lot of these third-party creators.
Just a bit.
Just a little bit. I do
Yeah.
represent a lot of these third-party creators, and they're like, when I say lost momentum, I mean they're still at a higher watermark than when they started 2023, of course.
Yeah.
25-50%, but they're not at their projected like 300 to 500%.
Right. They had some, cat champagne dreams and stuff like that, and it's just not working out that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like if WotC had taken maybe a week or two less or a week or two more to do what they were going to do, things would have been a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. I wish things had worked out slightly differently for the benefit of my clients, but at the end of the day, this hobby that we love is better overall because of the way things ended up going.
Yeah, and like I really tried to summon up my own irritation after that happened, but once Creative Commons was in play, I was like, I really can't be upset about this anymore, because no matter what they do for any other iteration of D&D, they've put the most popular version of it
in the Creative Commons.
Yeah, in a public sphere where they cannot take it. People are going to be playing 5e for the next 30 years because of that. And people are going to be making money off of 5e for the next 30 years because of that.
Yeah, like, oh yeah, we're going to have this new edition, which I know we're going to talk about later. Maybe we skip to that now, but
sure.
Yeah, so they're going to have One D&D.
But we're not allowed to call it that anymore, because that was never the actual name of it.
Don't call it One D&D. It's D&D 6e officially, or whatever it is. It's D&D goes digital.
Yeah. I like how now they're saying 6e when before it was like it is iterative. It is absolutely not a new edition.
It is Dungeons and Dragons and digital sales. And so it is going completely digital. There's certain things I can't talk about that I know about because they're subject to NDA and attorney-client privilege, that it's just gonna be wild, man.
I'll say this though, like I am sure that everything in your head that you can't talk about, somebody else has speculated about it. So somewhere out there, there are nuggets of gold floating around the pyrite.
I will say I'm really excited about some of the things that I can't talk about, and because I think they're beneficial for third-party creators, which is good. Now, D&D 6e, it's an even numbered edition. Nobody's gonna care. Like
it's the opposite of a Star Trek movie.
Right, exactly. Like nobody cares about 4th edition sucked. I don't care what Dungeon Master's block says. Nobody like 4th edition sucked. But I would say that 5th edition is definitive, 3.5 is definitive, and 5th edition too stay.
I would argue that 3.5 is definitive because of Paizo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never forget rolling a 3.5 rogue and just how many skills you just kept checking boxes, and like you just dumped everything except dex, and you could just you could melt through the fucking floor and steal anything. It was amazing. I miss it. It was highly imbalanced, especially the spell thief. So I digress.
Yeah. Last week I played Baldur's Gate 2 for a little bit. And I started playing in 2nd edition. So that's what I used to be used to. It's amazing how much I dislike it now.
Yeah.
Having played something much easier.
Rough, buddy. And that's the thing is, like, you see stuff like I think the Star Wars KOTOR was based on 3.5. So like it was so ingrained in society, you know what I mean? So
yeah, but One D&D.
Yeah, but One D&D. DOA, One D&D and DOA, Dead on Arrival.
No, I mean, you obviously know where this is going, better than most people, but it's like I would never again in my life bet against Dungeons and Dragons, because like at a certain point, a reaction becomes self-sustaining, and there's very little that you can do to stop it, and you just have sort of a runaway nuclear effect. So they can really do whatever they want, and it's going to be fine. Like I. When we were at PAX Unplugged last month, like I was able to demo the
I was wondering if you're going to bring up the VTT.
Yeah, the VTT, and I was when I first saw the demo videos of the VTT, I was like, well, this is just Diablo, like because it's it's an isometric dungeon, but then we started using some of the building tools and things like that. And my closest comparison to it would be like Dungeon Keeper from like 20 years ago, or just like sort of like Sim style tools for it. But it was just so much more fluid. The dynamic lighting was fantastic. I really liked how it flowed. I didn't get to play with any kind of like character pathfinding going through it or anything like that, because you run into a lot of AI problems with things like that. But I feel like that's probably a solved problem.
What's really fun is, and this is one of those things where like I'm dancing around what I can say. I'm part of the test flight groups for the VTT. I don't know if I told you that, by the way.
No, you didn't.
I'm part of the test flight groups for the VTT, and so the build that I have is light years behind what we showcased at PAX U, what we played at PAX U. And I'm really excited for our next iterations. And so because they clearly took the feedback that we gave them, and they're listening to the community.
That's good.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I guess my only thing about that is like I don't, I tend to play theater of the mind when I play. I don't like having to bring the technology to play this game that I play to get away from technology. So it has less of an effect and influence on me, but I'm 42 years old, right? Somebody who's half my age probably approaches playing D&D in a much different way. It's like it's like Star Wars for me. I think I was talking to Josh about this recently. It's like when I was in the theater watching like Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, I just sort of had a revelation that like this just isn't made for me.
It's made
anymore.
For kids.
Right. And so like that's fine. That like I don't have to hate it. It's just not made for me. It's like I don't hate Paw Patrol. It just doesn't factor into my life.
I hate Paw Patrol. But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. That's just that's just cartoon propaganda. But I will say
all cops are bark.
One question I have for you. I'm ignoring that. What question I have for you? You've got a chance to play the VTT at PAX Unplugged. What system was it?
I don't know.
Anyway, so I think there was a D&D movie this year.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just to clarify that, like I walked in, I made no assumptions, and I was just a little too spellbound by the actual product itself.
Yeah.
So I didn't pay any attention to it. And there's a reason that I don't work in journalism anymore.
Let's put it this way. I don't think you would have recognized it as much as you feel like you did. So, yeah, that's the extent of what I could comment on that topic.
That's fine and fair. When I asked you to do this today, I knew you would spend the entire time having to walk a very fine line about things, which is actually half the fun of having you on the show, because I often feel like I have a pretty good idea of what you can and can't talk about.
Yeah.
And just like seeing how far we can push you up to the line is always really good.
I appreciate you.
It's really good. But yeah, so, you bringing up the D&D movie thing, that to me is just such a wild anomaly this year, is like D&D finally on the upswing. Like they'd recovered more or less. Cause like, I mean, at this point, as far as I'm concerned, they've completely recovered from what happened 12 months ago.
Yeah, agreed. So they've actually smashed projections that they had because of all of the different media that D&D's been in.
Yeah. And you've still got outliers out there who are like, well, I'm just not supporting WotC anymore because of that. I've had some YouTube comment conversations with some of them. I'm like, hey, if that's how you feel, that's fair. Vote with your wallet. You know, like whatever you want to do. But they were weirdly respectful about the whole thing. They were like, hey, anybody can do whatever they want to do. This is just what I'm doing. I'm like, thank you for not getting in an internet argument with me.
That's awesome.
This. That's very pleasant. But so like right in the middle of all this stuff, as they're getting their momentum back, what was it, like March, that the D&D movie came out and just bombed. It just bombed completely.
Which is, we got to be very careful with when you say bombed, because they'll sing the Pinkertons. No, I'm kidding. So when you say it bombed, you mean that it was a box office failure by how box office metrics are judged, right?
Including the marketing costs, because you have to take the budget and double it to include the marketing costs.
What was it?
Its budget was 150 million. Its box office was 208 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was almost 100 million short of just breaking even.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. It was a phenomenal movie. I loved that movie. I have seen it 4 times.
Yeah, I like how Hugh Grant is now firmly in his I don't care, I just have bills to pay era of acting, because like he did an interview recently about the Willy Wonka prequel, and he's like, I don't even know what I did. I got kids, man. That was pretty much an exact quote from him.
Listen, I was really hot back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of sex. And now I gotta pay for it. So yeah, no.
So in 20 years, we're gonna see Nick Cannon in these weird parts. in these
we already
movies.
Are.
Yeah. Like, Dr. Dolittle 15 starring Nick Cannon.
Nick Cannon as all of the animals and Dr. Dolittle. But here's the thing: is like it was a commercial failure, I'd say, but it was a fantastic movie. I think it was kind of a love letter to D&D fans everywhere. And while immediately after, they're like, oh, I don't know how it's going to do, because it's had all this resurgence. Especially, by the way, they actually made a ton of money on the partnership with Delta for the Delta in-flight stuff. But because of that, Chris Pine has said he's optimistic there's going to be a sequel.
Yeah, I saw that. But you know, I don't think, as long as there's like an ember to breathe on, that he's going to say otherwise. You know, because think how long like the Zack Snyder Justice League actors were like, oh yeah, you know, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. You know, because you really can't say anything about that. And I think the fact that we're coming up on a year later and they haven't announced a sequel, it clearly didn't meet expectations financially in any way, shape, or form, no matter how you do the accounting.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like Pine said that back in November or something like that, and and you know, going through the holidays, we're not going to get any news about it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something in March.
Yeah, and honestly, I won't be surprised either. I'm just like equally going to be not surprised if at this point there just nothing happens, and it's another 20 years before we get another D&D movie. I saw that first D&D movie in the theaters in college.
When did it come out?
2000, 2002, something like that.
I was 10 or 12.
Yes, because I believe 10 years older than you.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. But yeah, I said this to Josh at the time when it came out, and I actually think that this being a Dungeons and Dragons movie was what caused the problems for it. I think that was a net negative for the film, because, and here's my logic for that. Like, let's say I'm just a person who doesn't really play D&D all that much, right? Like, it's impossible not to at least have heard of D&D at this point, but I just don't play it very much.
Right.
D&D still has a bit of a stigma based on outdated information, and, you know, stereotyping and how things are in the culture and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So that's thing one. So if I'm not interested in D&D, if I don't play it, like, what's going to make me go to see a movie that's called Dungeons and Dragons : something else? You know, I think this movie would have done better if it had just been a generic fantasy movie that was not branded as Dungeons and Dragons.
I disagree.
At the very least, it would have done the same. I don't think Dungeons and Dragons helped it.
I disagree. And the reason is because I am all consumers, and all consumers are me, and what I feel is what everyone feels. Okay. And I would not have gone to see a generic fantasy movie because I'm burnt out on things. I mean, obviously I'm being facetious, but like I do think that there is a superhero movie, fantasy movie, generic fantasy movie burnout right now because of Marvel, because of The Hobbit was 3 movies for some reason.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you were able to slap a brand name that just got super revitalized because of Stranger Things. And you got a whole generation of kids that are learning about this because of toys and different merchandising opportunities. I do think that that does actually help it.
I think it's a factor, right? But let's talk about Stranger Things for a minute, right? Because like everybody always talks about D&D's resurgence with Stranger Things. Like Netflix wasn't giving out viewership figures.
No, you're right.
At that point. So like it's really easy to say Stranger Things and D&D had a huge cultural impact. They were really part of the zeitgeist.
Fair.
Where's the evidence? You know, because I'm sure like, and I don't want to turn this into something that sounds even vaguely political, but you just sort of have your sort of like Eastern elites kind of people watching the streaming. And you know, if I'm living out in the Midwest or something like that in more of a rural area, like maybe I'm not hip to all that as much. Maybe I don't pay attention to it as much. But the other part of that is like it's also possible to make an argument that Dungeons and Dragons is generic fantasy.
That's fair.
Yeah, because I think about sort of the antipathy I have sometimes toward a quote unquote traditional Dungeons and Dragons adventure because I'm very tired of just what I call elves in the forest kind of fantasy.
Yeah.
Because I've been playing it for 25 years and it just bores me a lot now.
Right,
like that's why stuff like, you know, Dark Sun is interesting to me.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, I think that's the image of it. Like, you know, like, and I always think about Lady Hawk as sort of the prototypical generic fantasy movie, right?
Yeah.
So like if I put Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves up there and I put Lady Hawk up there and let's, you know, do a regression analysis and just pretend and account for all the different factors like time and budget and everything like that. Like it's basically the same thing. Like tell me what the differentiator is in the non-tabletop role player's mind between those two films.
Chris Pine.
Well, remember, we're doing a regression analysis on it. So we're accounting for the differences between Chris Pine and a young Matthew Broderick.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure. Mainly because I don't know that I watched Lady Hawk.
I saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel in the 90s.
I know I didn't watch Lady Hawk now.
Yeah.
And so I will say that yeah, I don't know. I'm not a good person to do that analysis. I would say that, you know, the only comparisons I really have for like generic fantasy are still tied to brand names, like the ass terrible Aragon movie, or the just to pull out a few, or
just so everybody's clear, no, it does not represent Aragon.
No, I don't, and I'm sure Christopher Paolini is a fantastic author, but man, that movie was terrible. But I mean, The Hobbit being split into 3 movies, like I said. That makes sense. Now, Lord of the Rings, that trilogy, the original Peter Jackson trilogy, phenomenal. And I think that it's just been so muddy that I do think tying a brand name and then having a sexy Honor Among Thieves is a good way to kind of go about it.
Yeah, I just think that what that proved was that the D&D brand doesn't have as much cachet outside the hobby. As a lot of people really deep in it might like to think that it does.
Right.
Because it's not a butts and seats kind of thing for quote unquote average people.
Yeah, you know? You're right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then so maybe to make up for the money that was lost on this, WotC ended up jacking up prices on their books last year too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I wasn't surprised because having worked in publishing before, like I understand the reality of the inflation in materials costs and all that stuff and everything. Right. But I mean, those books were already expensive.
They were incredibly expensive. I would say that they're incredibly expensive. That said, I'm kind of a bad person to comment on this because I am part of the D&D creator program. # sponsored, I guess.
Right.
And so, but I did notice that there was more complaints about D&D book prices going up. And I think it's just more of the push to digital, man.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was about to say. Like I am sure that there's probably less of a volume of print that's being produced, and that translates because they're focusing on digital sales, and that translates to higher production costs for a lower volume of print books. And also, like for the most part, let's set Deck of Many Things aside, they have very high production values on the stuff that they put out.
Yeah.
So you're going to have like a really nice hardback book that's going to hold up to a lot of stuff. It's going to have hopefully not AI generated art inside it that people have been human beings have been compensated for putting together. But you know, like Planescape, it's like $85 for that for that 3-book set and the slipcover with the DM screen.
How much? Let me ask you a question. How much is Descent into Avernus right now, for the purposes of the audio video that you're inevitably going to cut here?
Yeah.
What about the player's handbook? How much does that cost published right now?
I'm looking it up.
Okay. Because on D&D Beyond it's $29.99, but it's cut down to $17.99, and it's been discounted for about as long as I can remember.
But aren't they having a 40% off sale right now?
Yeah, but it's still on sale, even when not, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wonder if that's just sort of the same thing as like if you go to buy a D&D book on Amazon, because it's always going to be way under MSRP. Like Player's Handbook, I think at MSRP is still $49.95.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there's something interesting on the D&D Beyond marketplace right now, by the way, that I can't publicly comment on, but should be something that you could probably take a look at some point, Brandon.
Okay.
It is weird. They have the Dungeons of Drakkenheim, which is marked with a third-party tag.
Interesting.
Ghostfire Gaming and Dungeon Dudes.
I did see that actually.
Huh. Grimhollow, the Lairs of Atharis, Ghostfire Gaming setting. Weird. A third-party thing on D&D.
Yeah, you know what's funny? That there's third-party stuff up there, but if I go to the D&D website, I can't find actual information about books that they've just released.
Yep.
That's pretty ridiculous.
Yep. So that is all I'm gonna say, because that's too much. I've said too much.
We'll have you back after the embargo is lifted.
Yep. So,
but what we were talking about was like the price of Wizards books, right?
Yeah, it's definitely shot up.
Yeah, talking to your mic.
Definitely shot up. Sorry, I was looking it up.
It's shot up, and it's kind of ridiculous, especially like in the last few episodes I've done some inflation comparisons, like with my Forgotten Realms box set from 1994 that cost $29.99. And you get like 3 books, three soft cover books, a bunch of maps, all the other widgets and everything like that. If you adjust that for inflation to $23, it's about $62.
Wow.
And they're charging me $85 for a slipcover Planescape with 3 hardcovers and a DM screen. Like, I don't know about you, and I will die on this hill, is that like settings, like actual campaign settings, God wants them to be released in a book or in a box format. He wants them to be released in a box format. I don't care if you're saying like, well, you get this nice protective slipcover, you get 3 hard covers, you get this really fancy 4-panel.
Get the alt cover sometimes too.
Yeah, I don't care. I want it in a box. I want it where I can keep everything together. The box that would have cost me less in today's dollars.
Right.
You know, but there's also, you know, and to get ahead of anybody who's going to argue with me about that, like, yeah, there are other factors because suppliers probably have changed. It's the general economy for that kind of thing has changed. But I think at the core of it is, adjusted for inflation, you're charging me more. For what I think is less of a slick product.
And you know, but I will say, man, Planescape's dope.
Planescape's dope, but I go back to I go back to my original feedback on it when Josh and I were talking about it. It's like, what did you give me that was different?
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. You opened up the old Disney vault, you pulled it out, and you put a sticker on it.
Look, here's the City of Sigil.
Mm-hmm.
Sigil still sucks.
Yeah. Lady of Pain still looks like a mutant marijuana leaf.
Yep. I will say it was really funny that they released Planescape in the City of Sigil right as I was planning stuff for Forgotten Paths to involve City of Sigil. And I literally messaged my D&D creator rep, and I was like, thanks. I'm sure you did this just for me. So,
but it again, like I found myself saying this a lot in the last year. It's like, what's the differentiator? What's your argument for me to buy this other than it's new?
right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think additions and so here's the problem is we're getting to the place in D&D's publications where they're re-releasing stuff and you can find the same thing across multiple source books, which in theory could be great if you miss one, but I don't need 3 different publications for the Artificer.
Yeah.
I need one. And you can give me additional classes and stuff, but I need one. And I like the tweaks and stuff that you put out, but I just need one.
And and we could see that's where it was going when they released that like Monsters of the Multiverse book.
Yeah.
That collected from several different bestiaries just into one book.
Right.
And like I talked to folks in the G&G community who were like, well, gosh, I'm glad you all reviewed this and told me what it was, because I was planning to go buy it and I would have wasted, X number of dollars on it.
Yeah. That's the thing is like here's what they're doing is they're putting out all these settings and they're releasing adventures with them, but they're not. So they're giving you A, they're giving you B, and they're giving you C, but they're not telling you how to put them all together. They're not saying, here's what we want you to do with it. This is what we thought you could do. It's, hey, look, sigil. Cool. What do you want me to do with this? Like, I can incorporate sigil into one of my campaigns, but it's not going to be like the thing that I do every time. You know what I mean? So it's give us adventures or give us death, I guess. Yes.
And I guess I have a retroactive answer for my question, because with Planescape, because if I wanted to ask what did you give me new, they would the correct answer is probably Journeys to the Radiant Citadel.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because if they'd released Planescape first and then released that, it would be a whole different criticism.
Yeah, absolutely.
It. But there again, it's like a fresh coat of paint on an existing idea.
I will say though, for all that we're knocking at, I really do like the fact that we are getting predictable releases at this point.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm thankful because 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, I really wish they'd do something other than Curse of Strahd. Like give me something else. Like I also think Curse of Strahd should have been a more full Ravenloft setting, and I'm kind of surprised that they haven't done that, and instead they did it over 2 books, like Van Richten's Guide and Strahd. So I think that's kind of weird, but like I like it, and I have nothing against there being a 5th edition Planescape out. I think my thing is like, let's remix it a little bit. I want something different. I want a reason for me to run out there and get it. Like like I said, I'm a big fan of Dark Sun, and I would love to see a 5e Dark Sun release, but I've talked in the past about reasons why that can't really happen in sort of the current era. So there would have to be changes for that.
I would also say that, like, talking about bundling in general, I really like what they did when they gave us Phandelver and Below, and the Shattered Obelisk, because they didn't just give us more Phandelver. They didn't just take, oh hey, everyone's played this adventure, including the McElroys. They said, oh, and here's more, and also we brought back the original team. So like Mike Schley worked on Phandelver, did the original Phandelver cartography, and then came back for it. Like I do like what they're doing with those, and so
I like that, and I always will support people who go out and take a big creative swing on something, whether or not I agree with it or disagree with it, and whether it was successful or unsuccessful. I appreciate people who are willing to go out there and make the effort. I thought what they decided to do with Phandelver was interesting. I like talking about the differentiator. That's what I mean by a differentiator. Take that thing and then put a spin on it and remix it. Now, having said that, I would have appreciated it more if that came out 5 to 10 years from now, and it didn't feel like they gave me a book that I bought in 2014 and then put 4 extra chapters on it.
Right, huh? Weird. 2014, that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, but my argument there is 2014, right? 5e comes out. 5e starts getting momentum, starts getting popular. So you've got like a 2 to 3 year span from 2014 to 2017. All these new people are coming in to the hobby. And what are they playing? They're playing Lost Mine of Phandelver as their first adventure, right? Like I look at that as like it shouldn't have been as long to be re-released as like Planescape or something like that.
Right,
but we're
right.
still really too close to that to take what is like the first 4 chapters of it are the same thing.
Huh.
Like there should be more space there.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it all being in one spot.
I mean, and I think I said this when Josh and I were talking about it. It's like there are people who this makes sense for. Like that. So I'm not knocking it just generally as an idea, but just for me, I don't like, I would have loved the opportunity to have like sort of the last part of it and be able to purchase that separately digitally.
Right.
You know, if I already had the first part of it rather than having to
Oh, yeah, I see
rebuy it.
what you mean. You
Yeah.
like got like a different bundle option kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I don't want to have to pay for something I already have just because you've added a new thing to it.
Now, back in my day, you had optional add-ons and you could buy things
Yeah.
a la carte. That's you right now.
Well, no,
So,
honestly, like the obelisk part of it should have been sort of physical DLC for Fandelver.
physical
Yeah.
DLC. So
Yeah.
PLC.
A supplement.
Yeah. So I mean, next thing you know, you're gonna tell me that something, speaking of your ancient ways, that something happened with like Luke Gygax or something this year.
It was Ernie Gygax. Thank you very Luke. I was gonna say Luke's the nice one. Don't get him mad at you.
Yeah, I love Luke.
Luke's making a sneaker.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's making some sort of D&D sneaker. I can't remember the details, but I saw it like several weeks ago.
Yeah, Luke's really cool.
And the only reason I looked at it is because I got a Google alert that was like Gary Gygax's son releasing sneaker, and I was like, that son of a bitch. He's already moved on to something else.
Nope, it's Luke. It's the cool one. So
yeah,
tell me about Ernie, because I actually completely missed this.
I can't believe you completely missed this.
I had a few other things going on.
Yeah, but like you're familiar with Ernie and NuTSR and everything, and Neckbeard, Grognard, OSR, etc., right? So then, and you were familiar with the whole Star Frontiers thing? Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, like they were Justin Lanasa and Ernie Gygax, who owned NuTSR, they were claiming that they could release Star Frontiers, which was an old sci-fi RPG, and then WotC was like, wait, actually, and so there was a lawsuit, and like in the general more enlightened D&D community, and I mean people who are my age and younger probably, and who shave their necks on a regular basis, and hey, I have a line of demarcation right here.
Same, mine's like
right here. Yeah. But
that's the YouTube short right there, by the
way. Yeah, my line of demarcation. But he he's got a lot of bad opinions about the kind of inclusivity that we want to foster in D&D these days. So whenever he fails, I smile. But they had to and I think like WotC countersued them, and Josh and I read through the court documents, or the filing documents, and it was just really hilarious, because I mean it's hilarious and it's awful because there are some terrible racist terms that are in the documents. I would encourage anybody who really wants to have a full understanding of how heinous this is to go read those. But just steel yourself for it a little bit, because it gets really bad. It's the kind of stuff that you might hear in an anthropology class in the 1950s or the 1940s or something like that. But anyways, they ended up having to file for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. After they were trying to screw over consumers, because they kept advertising that stuff was going to be on sale and they were going to be selling this, that, and the other thing, and then stuff would just start disappearing from the site.
Brandon, let me just say, the trash takes itself out.
Yes. And it was just, again, like if something unfortunate happens to somebody who wants this hobby to go back to what it was, 30, 40 years ago, whatever, man. The world has moved on. We've moved on. Like G&G was founded specifically to create inclusive spaces. So people who were afraid to play tabletop or go into places where tabletop was played would have a place to go. So I got no tolerance for that. But yeah, they're trying to sue Wizards of the Coast for the rights to that Star Frontiers, and they had like a crowdfunding campaign for it. I'm pretty sure it wasn't on Kickstarter. It was one on one of the also rans. Which is a sign of something in and of itself. But yeah, and it all came down to the TSR logo, where they were using the TSR logo, and
which is owned. They don't have that right. Okay, that's wild.
Yeah, but like reading like just this sentence from the Dicebreaker story about it from earlier in the year. It's like perhaps more importantly was the claim that TSR's new version of Star Frontiers contained quote blatantly racist and transphobic and reprehensible content, according to Wizards of the Coast's 2022 injunction that aimed to stop playtesting, distribution, or design work on Star Frontiers. And believe me, I've read through some of it. All of that is accurate.
And I haven't. So, well, cool. Good for them. I'm glad.
Yeah. Good for us.
Weird hill to die on, but at least they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of weird stuff, this is something that Josh and I have been just like over the last, 7 or 8 months, have just been like, what the hell? And it's that free online D&D channel.
See, I don't know about this one either. You put this in the show notes. I know nothing about it. What is it?
It's
tell me so I can find it.
Yeah, it's online. It's an FAST, like a free. I used to know what that stood for, but it's basically just a free like online D&D channel. And they have like 4 shows. They have a D&D cooking show. They have reruns of the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and they have 2 actual play shows. One of which is hosted by Matthew Lillard. Like I remember, like they were playing it at PAX Unplugged, Faster, Purple Worm, Kill.
D&D Adventures.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I know about this.
Okay, I was going to say, how can you not know about that?
That's bad that I don't know about that.
It's just so odd. Like I keep coming back to like, who asked for this? Because okay, so it's ad supported, right? So like it's free ad supported television. That's what it stands for. But so it's ad supported. Okay, fine. But how many people are watching it? Because that's going to dictate your ad rates for it.
Right.
And like there are actual like sets for this stuff. Like, so there actually had to be some material that was used to build and maintain and heat and light this.
And that's the thing. And so there's a lot of budget out here for this kind of stuff. And I work with a couple of production companies that have been doing D&D and tabletop related kind of things related to this. So this is actually a little familiar. I just didn't realize that this is what it was. There's just a ton of money because they have the views and they want the ads and they want they want to make some sort of revenue because content is king, but they don't know what to do with it.
Right. But see, talking about they have the views, like I would easily understand that if this was on Twitch or on YouTube or a well-known site for video. But they're doing their own thing, and you have to generate your own audience for that.
Well, so look where it's being distributed, though. It's being distributed on what was it? Amazon Freevee and Plex. Which those
are people still using Plex?
Yeah, they are. And so that's the thing. It's like anything has its last gasp of monetary spend.
Right.
So that's what's happening with a lot of these fast channels is like they're either trying to get off the ground, and so they have a lot of VC money behind them, and so they're making a ton of money. They're saying, hey, budget, go do this. And that's why you see specifically 22 episodes. It was pitched like a standard pilot for that one show. But this is just a slate of shows that was ordered just to provide content on these and try and use a cash in a brand name.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was no strategy to it. I think that was the thing that was just shocking me so much. It's like, okay, 2 actual play shows. Okay, I can understand that. That makes sense. The D&D cartoon. Okay, like now we're getting into sort of tangentially connected things to it, right? Because like that's nothing that anybody's going to make time to sit down and watch these days. If it's on, right? And then you get to that D&D cooking show. Like they released that.
Yeah.
I mean, they released that cookbook not too long ago, and that was well received. And I thought it was like actually a very good book and a very good cookbook. But I don't know if it's the kind of book that you adapt into a television series.
Yeah,
for D&D.
I don't know that you do, but I think there's definitely a market for that. And so like there's a market for that on Twitch, and there's a market for that on other like Yoke TV was one of those.
Oh, that's one I've never heard of.
Yeah, and so they've had markets for like celebrity tabletop cooking related things like cosplay cooking and stuff like that. And so it's literally just VC money paying for slates of shows, paying for a license to use the D&D logo. And somebody said, oh, hey, Dimension 20 is a thing, and then didn't get any like real industry professionals to run it. I'm sure they got people that have worked in the industry, but you don't have the production houses like Hyper RPG or Pixel Circus or or any of the people like Becca Scott working on these things. You see celebrities coming in and generic lighting around the table, so they clearly looked at something but don't know how to properly do camera angles. Like if you look at some of the stills from it, the camera angles are all wrong too. So it's like it's literally a throw money at it and then they just pick the wrong people to do it.
Yeah. See, as you were talking, I was like, all the like. Am I just out of touch? No, the children are wrong.
The children are wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is because there's so much desire to make content that people are easily convinced that content needs to be out there, which leads to a super saturation of the market.
You're listening to the Goblins and Growlers podcast.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like, here's what it is. Goblins and Growlers podcast is unique in that it's anyways, moving on.
when we were at PAX and I was meeting people out, like when I would give them my card, I'm like, oh yeah, just scan that QR and you can see our podcast. They're like, oh, you have a podcast? I said, I'm a white man who's middle-aged. Of course I have a podcast.
That's right. I always tell people, listen, download Forgotten Pats. It's another actual play. Everyone has an actual play. So do I.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, you're a lawyer. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, no, that's some really good perspective on that, because I hadn't thought about just all this budget lying around for it, right? And when this was announced, I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I kind of stopped thinking about it for a couple months, and then I guess it was like November that it actually launched, and I was like, oh yeah, that was a thing, wasn't it? Because I honestly kind of thought it was just not going to happen. That's what I felt like.
What's really funny, and I can kind of talk about this right now, is that I was actually working on a show that was going to have Will Wheaton, Seth Green, Patton Oswalt, and a few others for but it was going to go on Peacock. And so I was working on that show, and so it's funny to see Faster, Purple Worm, Kill that has Deborah Ann Wool, Patton Oswalt, Will Wheaton, and Seth Green. Like, you plus 3 other people. That's the show that I had.
Yeah. Yeah. Deborah Ann Wool is great, though. She does not get the recognition that she deserves.
Yeah.
When I found out she was into D&D and was just posting about it like all the time, I was like, oh man, as if I could not love Daredevil even more.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, she's fantastic. Let's try and get her on the podcast.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Yeah. And then just like one last thing that is just cast sort of a huge shadow over the last 12, 13 months is AI in content creation. We did like a 2-part episode with Tess just talking about like the possibilities of using AI to help create your content, and just why probably you shouldn't do that. But then also, like, of course, everybody's trying to figure out how to make money off of AI content.
Right.
And by that, I mean, spend less money using AI content and keep more of it in their pocket. And even Wizards was not immune to feeling the burn of AI, whether they meant to or not.
Yeah. And that's the thing is here's the misconception, and this is going to be really unpopular. So I'm glad it's at the end of the episode.
This will be the thumbnail and headline on YouTube.
No. People saw the D&D art. Was that during Gen Con? Yeah, when it broke that there was some AI art in whatever was released then. Was it Glory of the Giants, I think?
Yeah, it was Glory of the Giants.
Yeah, and so Glory of the Giants was released. Somebody saw, this was maybe using generative AI.
If I recall the particulars, like the artist used some either generative AI for inspiration or used some generative AI to do some finishing on it after.
Yeah, there was some finishing issues because I remember distinctly the image having that let clear. Oh, AI doesn't know how hands work. And there's an extra arm here. And then it happened again while we were at PAX U, which is just funny. But here's the thing is that D&D reiterated and WotC reiterated their commitment that AI has no place in the art. And I believe them. I don't think that was intentional. I don't think that was WotC getting in there, because these books are planned years in advance, and the art is created years in advance and months in advance. And so it's not that.
I agree with you. And just before I lose my thought, I'm going to interrupt you. I agree with you. And that's because I think a lot of people don't understand exactly how art departments at these kind of companies work, right? Like there's not a room in the Washington State where there's like 15 artists on the payroll for Wizards of the Coast sitting there drawing everything, right? These are all independent contractors that they're working with. And part of working with independent contractors is you just kind of trust that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so D&D got sniped twice, and they have a big reputation, but honestly, it's on the contractors here, in my opinion.
Now you can argue that they should have instituted some checks, after sort of seeing the rapid development of AI, and like going from DALL-E to Midjourney, which is now on its like the 6th iteration of Midjourney, makes perfect faces, like it's photorealistic, right? So you could make an argument that they should have like thought ahead on that, but you can like argue a lot of stuff about people thinking ahead. Like it's one of those like you don't know what you don't know kind of things.
Yeah, there's so many strawmans in this that I don't think that I don't think that there was any bad intent, but I do think that AI is the problem. That is that a lot of companies are so capitalism as an adjective. I think
much capitalism, very money.
Much capitalism, very money, that they see AI as a replacement for the worker, where it should really more be AI is a assistant tool. It is a QuickBooks. AI is in Microsoft Excel. Which, you go, okay, there's going to be this is the internet, so the YouTubers are going to be like, oh, actually, this replaced some people with data entry and accounting. I don't give a fuck about you. Go home. But what I mean is it should be a tool as opposed to a replacement. And a lot of people are viewing it as a replacement, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I play with it all the time. I pay for a Midjourney account, but mainly
do you? Nice.
I do. Yeah, I pay $30 a month, and it's mainly just so in the private Discord that I have with my friends from high school, we have a channel just for creating stupid Midjourney ideas that usually involve putting Steve Harvey and Louis Anderson into uncomfortable situations.
Oh no!
And learning ways to get around the filters.
Yeah,
to make it more embarrassing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I have opened up ChatGPT a couple of times and said, like, hey, I'm working through this. Is there a better way to say this? You know what I mean? Not from like my legal work, but for like when I am, for example, earlier today, I opened it up because Trevor May was streaming, and as a friend and also podcast dad, Trevor May, somebody in chat joked that he should run for president in 2024. So I opened up ChatGPT and said, hey, give me Trevor May's campaign slogan. And it was Trevor May for America 2024, pitching a better future for everyone. I was like, that's
get some little I like Ike buttons made up that say all the way with Trevor May.
All the way with Trevor May. Yeah. See, there you go. Campaign manager right here.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's why you don't need AI, because they can't make those great creative leaps like the human brain can.
You don't need AI because dads exist. But we have dad humor.
The last thing I want to ask about the AI art thing is the one that popped up at PAX Unplugged. Was that the fake one? Because there was a fake one.
Yeah, I think that was the fake one.
Yeah, because I remember I was looking at Facebook, and I think it was like that night that I got back from PAX, and I saw that out of nowhere and with no context, the Dungeons and Dragons Facebook account posted their AI guidelines again.
Yeah.
And I dug into it a little more, and a friend of mine from sort of outside our little circle was like, oh, hey man, did you see this? And like apparently a bunch of people on Reddit like saw something and thought it was AI, and they just freaked out about it because they don't understand how graphic design works.
Actually, I found that the people of Reddit and comments on YouTube and TikTok are actually very rational and thoughtful people.
Well, if you are a rational and thoughtful person and Reddit's just not doing it for you, I wholeheartedly advise you to join the conversation on the Goblins and Growlers Discord, bit.ly/Goblin Discord. You can find me on various socials at Way of Brandalore. I'm not really on Twitter/X anymore, but I still have an account there. Josh is on Blue Sky at Black Cloak DM, and on Discord. Go to Linktree at Goblins and Growlers, and you can find all our. Did you know we have a podcast? We have an actual play because everybody has an actual play. It's called Quid Pro Roll. It's our sister podcast, and you can follow it on your podcatcher of choice because it's available basically everywhere.
Yeah.
And then finally, word of mouth not only is the greatest Ludicrous album, but it is the best way to tell people about our podcast. So telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. And we'd love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review on your podcatcher of choice. If you're not going to leave us a 5-star review, do me a favor and don't leave a review, and reach out to me on social media at Way of Brandalore and let us know your criticism so we can address it and win you back as a customer.
I will say, everybody, if you enjoyed the show, tell your friends. If you didn't, tell your enemies.
Noah, I believe I might be wrong about this, but I seem to recall you have some kind of podcast.
Oh yeah, weird. Yeah, so I have a podcast called Forgotten Paths. It's an amazing show. We have 61-hour episodes available plus 4 miniseries. 5th one will be out at the same time as this show. So when you're done here, go listen to that. And you'll love it. It's an amnesia campaign. We have fun, and maybe we have campaign 2 coming in 2024.
Ooh. And then also some couple housekeeping things. If you're not watching this on the YouTube channel and you're listening to this in audio, do me a solid and subscribe to the Goblins and Growlers YouTube channel, because I'm actually trying to do stuff with it in 2024. So that would be really swell. And then also we have a monthly gaming newsletter. I can only muster up the time and patience to put it out once a month. So I promise I won't spam you with it. And it's like indie recommendations, it's TTRPG news, and just generally how's it going, and a nice little note to start to end your month with. And you can subscribe to that at the link at the top of our link tree. Noah, do you have anything else left you need to pitch? I feel like I've used up all the oxygen in this room in the last probably 3 minutes.
Yeah, check out the rest of the shows on the network, the May Contain Action Network. You can check it out by Googling.
Check this out. Search for it.
It's it's Linktree/MCA pods.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching/listening. And Noah, thank you for helping out me and helping out Josh by taking time out of your very busy evening when you've told me you haven't even eaten dinner yet. You're not, if you don't do that, you won't be a man of substance much longer.
Thanks, bud.
Right. Yeah. All right. We'll catch up to everybody later. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Everybody have a good one.
Bye.